Brewing 101 and fermenting. So when you're brewing beer, right here's the recipe list. You got 4 main ingredients of beer. It starts with your malt, your barley. That gets roasted to various levels. You could have a light roast, you could have a dark roast. It's exactly like coffee. It's a parallel. If you want a really dark roast, you're going to wind up with something like Guinness, a stout, or a porter. Okay, and then you can go lighter roast for let's say a veranda blend in coffee, or a light beer, a yellow beer. And there's this spectrum in between, but that is right there is your malt. This is your fermentable sugar that gets dissolved in water. These are the bookends. If all you have is sugar water and you ferment it, you have something that's very sweet that you will not enjoy drinking a big 12 or 16 ounce glass of. So they add hops. Hops are a bittering agent. Hops also are a preservative, okay? And there's some duality of that. The bittering agent sharpens off the sweetness of the malt, okay? But the hops is that preservative. So way back in the past, when England, the sun never set on the English Empire, India was a commonwealth of England, and they had soldiers throughout India. Okay, so the soldiers there wanted British ale. They would ship British ale on ships down across the Horn of South Africa, and when it got to India, it was spoiled. So the brewers were like, well, we're going to double the hop content, which increases the bitterness.
Okay.
And then to offset that, they added more malt, which increases the ABV, or alcohol by volume. But they created a style called India Pale Ale. Okay, so, and that's just a little bit of history of beer, just this general conversation. Anyone that's really into beer knows this stuff, but not everybody knows this stuff. That's why I'm going through it. And then to that mixture, you add this yeast. Yeast is in the test tube because it's literally a living organism. They add yeast to this combination of water, barley, and hops, which is called wort, and then they add yeast. And yeast is a microorganism. It's alive. It begins hunting around and feeding on the sugars. And that feeding process, it eats the sugars, digests it, and the byproducts are alcohol and carbon dioxide. That happens during fermentation. So right behind me here, these are the fermenting tanks at Crushed by Giants Brewing Company in downtown Chicago. They have 6 beers on tap. They have 6 fermenting tanks. Now come over here, Ryan, and take a look at this 5-gallon bucket. What's happening there, it almost looks like that bucket is boiling. We're gonna zoom in on that. And that bucket is not boiling, it's just sitting at room temperature. But what it has is this hose that's captured right there, right? And that's just a hose coming down into that bucket. And what's happening inside this tank is active fermentation. The yeast literally is having a party in there. They're taking the fermentable sugars, they're breaking them down to 2 byproducts. Alcohol on one hand, that's why we drink beer, because that gives us what we want. And the other byproduct is carbon dioxide. If this was a sealed vessel, this vessel would literally explode over time because of the pressure of the yeast doing their thing and producing that carbon dioxide. It would be a pressure vessel. So they seal this off with some purified water. It's just like boiled water, so it's clean. And that carbon dioxide, that tube is under the top, and it's just coming out of there. That's how fast this stuff is fermenting. It's just carbon dioxide coming out of there. And eventually they'll put that into bottles and cans and they'll cap it. You can get natural carbonation by capturing that carbon dioxide. But whenever you see that, that is real fermentation happening on the spot. It's super exciting because, in this tank, fresh beer is happening. We might be a week away from them serving this and it all being good to go into the customers' bellies.
That's really cool.
Isn't that?
It's really cool.
Super cool.